and his classes were like gymnasiums. You would go to work out. One of his students called it a spiritual gymnasium. We would paint for hours, and then we would look for hours, and always the challenge. And Sam would relate art to history, to mythology, to religion, to every other aspect of life in his talks, and also to science in particular. He was fascinated by science and the energy that lies beneath the surface of forms. And that's what you see, I think, in his abstract paintings. And what we were all trying to convey was the spirit, the energy that infuses all life. So I got to work with him so closely.
Welcome to the Famous or Forgotten podcast, the making or missing of great artists. Welcome to this episode of the Famous or Forgotten podcast. If this is your first time tuning in, the purpose of this podcast is to explore the making or forgetting of great artists. Today, we are very fortunate to be joined by Pat Stark Feinstein, who is the wife of the late artist Sam Feinstein, who is a legend in the Philadelphia abstract artist movement. We're very fortunate as well because Pat is in the middle of getting ready for the 8th showing of Sam's work. So we were just talking before we started recording about the immense undertaking that goes underway with getting these shows together. So we were grateful to have you on in the first place, but even more so now after hearing all of the logistical details that go into it. So to kick things off, we'd love to hear a little bit about your background, and if we can maybe start with where you and Sam met and how that all progressed.
Right. Well, I was studying art and art history at Mount Holyoke College when I bumped into someone who took me to New York on a trip, and I met Sam and his wife, then Anita Feinstein, who were living in a loft in the middle of Manhattan. And they were both painters, both deeply involved in the creative world and a world that I found fascinating. I mean, an authentic world. Their focus was on creating. Sam was also teaching in this big loft as well. And I started studying with him the following summer on Cape Cod. He had a house on Cape Cod. And later on, I guess a decade or so later, I studied with him very intensively in Philadelphia and began taping his classes because I found them so moving, so rich in content. Someone has said, and actually it was a gentleman who made a film about him at one point, so we have a couple of films about him, said that Sam was as articulate with words as he was with paint. And this is absolutely true. So I have fabulous audio tapes, and eventually I taught with him as well as studying with him, and his classes were like gymnasiums. You would go to work out. One of his students called it a spiritual gymnasium. We would paint for hours, and then we would look for hours, and always the challenge. And Sam would relate art to history, to mythology, to religion, to every other aspect of life in his talks, and also to science in particular. He was fascinated by science and the energy that lies beneath the surface of forms. And that's what you see, I think, in his abstract paintings. And what we were all trying to convey was the spirit, the energy that infuses all life. So I got to work with him so closely over the years of being with him. Ultimately, unfortunately, his wife, Anita, passed on in 1980. And Sam and I got together in about 82, and we were married for 20 years until he died 2003. And Sam had, even before I met him, had withdrawn from showing his art. He was so active in the 1950s, and part of his experience was getting behind the scenes of galleries and how galleries work, and things that he didn't necessarily respect. that much at the time. He had a press pass for museums, and he was writing for a national magazine for 3 years. He even wrote a review of the Whitney Annual 1 year for Art Digest magazine. So at the time, he was working out of Hoffman's principles. He had begun as a realist, commercial artist. He could do anything, and very realistically. But his work moved toward abstraction, finding the energy of nature underneath the surface so powerful that just the outside look of things was more meaningless to him. And depiction. He would do that while he was watching television. He would do portraits for people. Perfect. And beautiful ones. He just, renderings, he called them. And so he went on to work abstractly in a gestural way, fully free, with full color palette, full range of gestures and forms to create meaningful, what he would call evocations, something that would evoke in the spectator something meaningful and touching and enlightening. And so when his friend Clement Greenberg said, "Oh boy, you gotta keep going. We're heading toward Hard Edge and Color Field, and you're going to get left behind." I mean, he knew these people. Irving Sandler had interviewed him, et cetera. Well, he knew these people. That's not what he thought art was about. And he just withdrew. He was appalled by pop art. He thought it would just fall out of its own lack of weight. And maybe it still will some decade or some century. But anyway, he just withdrew and kept painting. And in the film that I just made, we have him speaking to a camera and saying that he just didn't see the relationship between showing and painting. He thought of painting more as a form of prayer, as a kind of meditation, a self-exploration, an awareness, a building of your own soul. And then the work's out there. He had one show in 1986 when a friend wanted him so much to show, and he wouldn't have anything for sale. One time he said to me about his withdrawal, he said, when pop art and hard edge and more decorative, thin painting, minimal painting was coming along, he said, in times like these, you have to make out of your life a monastery. And essentially that's really what he did. But he taught, and he had these wonderful classes. He never even advertised the classes. But he went to Philadelphia on Mondays, usually for a morning class and an evening class. Princeton Tuesday. He had 2 classes in New York, a Wednesday and a Thursday class. People just came word of mouth. And if they weren't interested in exploring the possibilities of the visual language in that way to create enlivened, spirited works, then they left. If they were looking to mass produce, sell, market, please the neighbors, impress the friends, they were in the wrong class. And they just left or didn't show up in the first place. And he occasionally would uninvite people. He expected people to really be committed. There was one quite wealthy lady who kept taking these long trips and then would drop into class, long trips and drop in. And she offered him a bunch more money to stay there. He said, "No, you're not committed enough to what you're doing. You're not taking it seriously enough. It's not a hobby." It was not a hobby for anybody. It was a deeply meaningful aspect of your life. And so I had this fabulous opportunity to teach with him in the 1980s. We taught 18 years in a row workshops in Toronto with large groups of people, and he would do, and eventually I did a couple of them too, a slide talk Friday evening and then painting all day, Saturday all day, Sunday, and discussions. And I eventually videotaped him, and all of these materials are ones that I have used for the book I wrote about him and for the film we're doing now. And when he died, there was no discussion prior to his death as to what was going to happen to his paintings. And for quite some time afterwards, I wasn't sure I should even sell them, show them. Well, I immediately was offered a show from somebody nearby on the Cape Cod who had seen enough of his work to say, I'm giving a show at this museum. And so that was coming along, and I decided I was still teaching. I was teaching art and art history at a private school. I left that position in order to handle his work because I had a sabbatical, and I went to the top floor of our brownstone, and there were rooms full of the most glorious paintings. It just blew me away over and over and over again. And I did find some smaller works that near the last 8 years of his life, I know he signed them and in cases dated them. So this said something to me. I mean, it's not that he didn't think that his work had some worth. I think he really felt it might, although it was never good enough for him. At the end of the show that he had in 1986 at this small gallery, somebody asked him, and this is on film because somebody made a little film about it at that time, asked him about his show. And he said, well, I wish I had a better set of paintings. But they're glorious, glorious paintings. And so I started showing and reaching out. One of the first one was the Painting Center in New York City. And I went down, and there was a show of Hoffman students. There wasn't one painting there half as good as Sam's, and Sam wasn't in the show. So I asked the lady, okay, all you have to do is come up with how many thousands of dollars, and you too can have a show here. And that's what I did. And I rented a truck. I drove the truck down to Spring Street on the cobblestones. I produced my own first little catalog. I took it to a printer. I took the photographs I had, learning to crop, learning to do things with photographs, and wrote the text and had the catalog. Irving Sandler came, and he said it was a wonderful, wonderful show. Wolf Kahn came. I had to rent I wanted to show Sam's Hoffman film. He had made a film about Hans Hoffman, a black and white film, and he was a wonderful filmmaker. He'd learned it in the Army, and then he had done a film, the very first film for the Philadelphia Museum of Art. So he made a 29-minute documentary about Hoffman's philosophy and a 10-minute sequence showing Hoffman painting a painting that's actually in the Metropolitan Museum of Art now. So we had shown that at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. We'd premiered it in 1999. I helped him he hand-lettered the credits with crayon. And then he was hauling, at the age of 85, hauling these great cases of 16-millimeter film from place to place in the city. I remember I went with him once, and it was a 4-story walk up to Ken Jacobs, who's a wonderful filmmaker, who helped him try to edit an initial out of the middle of a word that was in the narration. He was such a perfectionist and trying to get this together. Anyway, it was shown and premiered at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Well, at the Painting Center, I showed it. What did I do? I had to pay $2 a chair to rent 100 chairs. So Wolf Kahn in the front row had a place to sit. But I showed the film and answered questions and discussed, Sam's art and philosophy. So I did that show. One of his students was involved with an art center in Princeton, and she said, why don't you come down to a show here? I did. I rented a van. I bubble wrapped all the things. They were all acrylic. I didn't know how to even ship or package them. I did the best I could and hauled them down there, had a show, and showed, actually, there's this other film I'm talking about. It's called Sam's Show at Scargo. When he had his one show, this is between 1960 and 2003, he never showed except in 1986 to honor a friend.
Wow.
And somebody hired a local TV producer with a camera to come and film him. And they edited that film. And I'm using that. I have pieces of it in my new film, but also it's a wonderful film. I showed this 45-minute film to a large audience in Princeton. And I'll never forget that a man walked out at the end and he said, "Now I understand abstraction." Because
wow.
Sam is so clear about it. And that's film, and the new film I've got, and the Hoffman film, we're all going to be going on a new Vimeo account that we are establishing soon, along with taped interviews from his students. The more recent film, the filmmaker interviewed 20 of his students. And this is almost 20 years after he died. And the students were brilliant with things they said. They had wonderful recollections of his classes, of what he said, of what he meant to them in their lives, how he changed their lives. And we have all of that material too. So I have this wealth of material, and I'm just trying to get his paintings out to people who can appreciate them and see them, get them in museums. And it's mostly just a lot of intense effort. One way or another.
That's an amazing background, and like I said at the start of the show, just really speaks to the lift that you've put in to getting Sam's work out there. And I think what's unique about this episode too, compared to all of the others, and this is something that just dawned on me while you were speaking, a lot of the folks that we've interviewed, it's been kind of a secondhand, after the fact kind of experience that everyone's had, whether it was a gallery owner, somebody from a museum, a relative. Everyone has they weren't there for the work being done, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to hear from your perspective, knowing that, knowing all that you know from working side by side intimately with Sam, for lack of a better word, and then interviewing 20 of his students and, his take on fame and being out there in the art world. Where do his students sit with, their work being out there and marketed and all of that?
Right. And in a variety of ways, it's interesting. I think in the 60s, Sam actually discouraged people. In that early period when he withdrew, he discouraged people from showing. Wow. I mean, one of the most amazing things that he said at one point is to sell your work, to be, well, first of all, if you're selling, you're thinking about somebody else and what they want and what they might be willing to pay for and what's going to please a gallery owner. It doesn't have to do with a deep exploration of what your own sensitivity and awareness and consciousness can make into some independent presence, which is what he said, an independent new life that stands on its own. And he said, if you're trying to show, he said at one point in the late 1950s, he could produce a lot. He says, I can produce a lot, and he was showing a lot, late 50s, to meet deadlines, to get it out to the galleries, to get his work. He had to produce a lot, right? He said, but he thought it was shoddier merchandise than what he really was interested in doing. He said, if you're trying to sell, it's almost like trying to be a prostitute at night and a virgin in the morning. It's not that easy to do. And so he really discouraged people from selling and showing. But ultimately, he did put together a show for his late wife, Anita, and he gave a great deal of energy to the show he put on in 1986. And he said he was just so happy that people were pleased with the work, et cetera. And they did come from all over the Northeast to see that particular show because it was the only time you could see that. Now his students, some of them have been showing regularly. Some of them show off and on. Many of them have their own studios. There's a sculptor. I just saw his show, one of his beautiful pieces over here at the museum, and then a show that's there. He painted with Sam, but he's also a sculptor. But I think all of them in the interviews convey the idea, some of the basic principles that Sam believed in, which is that really a human being is acting as a kind of transmitter or transformer of the energies and the rhythm and dynamic drive that nature offers everything. Sam referred to that as plasticity, as the driving force that goes through all life, be it the apple tree, the blade of grass, whatever. This driving force that goes through, that aims for something good, that aims for the best it can be. There's no apple tree that's trying to aim for rotten apples, right? I mean, its aim is to make the most beautiful. Okay, the worm is aiming for, but it's the artist's job is to do that, is to be a transformer for those energies and for that rhythm, and to create works that are full of soul and spirit, that can uplift. It's not to imitate. He didn't really believe in art as a political thing. He didn't believe of art as documentation evidence. I mean, the word art, it's so fascinating because I taught for so many years, had so many students. In the Eskimo language, there are 11 different words for snow. For what type of snow? 11 words. We have this word art. And it is trying to encompass thousands, literally thousands. The Art Institute of New York, of course, is a culinary institute. All you have to do is look it up in the old yellow pages. It's a culinary institute. There's so many arts. For Sam, art was the holiest thing you could do. And we have him on tape in the film talking about it. The most religious thing you can do. Religion in the sense of reconnecting with some divine order, some higher power, some of the best of what can transpire through human activity and then be shared. And that whether it's poetry or dance or music, that's what it's about. And the filmmaker for our more recent film was inspired by words of Sam's, and I have them everywhere, quotes and, books he's written, etc. Creativity is spirituality looking for a form. And that's what has inspired this new film. And it's much of the film, it's about his life and how he came to his beliefs and his paintings, but a great amount is his teaching, because he was an educator through and through. He was a giver. He was a giver of life to other people, really, and a giver of life by helping them find their own lives and ways that are meaningful. And in creating a painting, that is one of the freest ways in which you can do that. Because unless you're aiming for marketing or trying to make pictures, impress me, if you're really working out of yourself and what you can discover, you learn how that every human being has order-making capacity and growth capacity and sensitivity, and all of those you're enhancing with your creativity as you're creating. And so that it's the healthiest thing you can do. Most everybody says that now. Certainly all the art therapists say that. But we all know if there was more of it, there would be healthier people in the world. So that's what he was. He was a giver of life to so many people and of possibilities and fame. He said once about, El Greco's work was lost for 200 or 300 years, was rediscovered by somebody who went to see Velázquez to study. Somebody, a scholar from France, went down to Spain and was interested in doing some research on Velázquez and discovered El Greco. And this was mid to late 19th century. And once he was discovered, it was like, wow, Cezanne certainly loved his work. Many loved his work. But Sam said, do you think El Greco cared where he is? Do you think it bothered him that his work didn't, And so many of the artists that we really treasure now were works that were rejected at the time they were made. The late Rembrandts, the late Michelangelos, El Greco, Cezanne. There are wonderful books I came upon as I was teaching art history. Books full of famous artists from the year 1899, 1900, 1905, full of names that you never heard of now. I mean, meanwhile, people are panning Monet, Van Gogh, etc. So,
amazing.
Yeah. So fame is a very ephemeral thing. I try to share. I don't want all of Sam's art to get lost to the world. I think it would be a loss, but I have no control over that. I have no control whatsoever. I mean, I do what I can do, try to get his work in museums, not very successfully. It's not in now, Yeah, so the museums, in order to survive, they have to become doing the most recent hep thing that's happening, which, another 10 years is not the hep thing that's happening. Another 100 years, it's gone. I think Sam's art, like El Greco's, maybe it'll last, maybe it won't. I won't be here, so.
Yeah, and thank you for all of that. And I know Alex has some questions that he's jotting down on our little shared thingy that we have going here. But I definitely jotted down the one quote that you said in the middle there, because I absolutely love it. And I think it's so true of what we've discovered in this series. Creativity is spirituality seeking form.
That's right.
I absolutely love that. And I think it speaks really high volumes of how in tune Sam was. And it mirrors exactly who you mentioned, where you have Van Gogh, Michelangelo, one of the artists that popped up in this while we were, kind of doing this exploration was Peter Miller. Yet no one knew who she was. Mm-hmm. All of her work was discovered in a barn by one of our previous guests. Uh-huh. And, he has all of her work now. And so I just wanted
that does become a problem.
and I just wanted to mention that because it's something that it seems like is a recurring theme. And again, Alex and I are analytical business guys, so it's kind of par for the course. But it seems like it's this trend of the spiritual artist and then somebody trying to make sure that this person just isn't forgotten.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So Alex, I'll turn it over to you.
It becomes a love of, a connection of your own soul to that person and a love of that art. It takes that to some degree. Although, there's a lot of art on the market that is marketable art. I mean, and what would be popular, it's just amazing to me to see. And I have to just know that, some small part might make a difference, but who knows? So I have reached out to museums, but at times I've reached out to museums for show, certainly, or to see if a work could go into group show. And I've sent proposals. And when I say proposals, I mean to do a proposal for a show. And I've been told that what I have to do is get him well known, that a gallery won't take him until he's well known. Okay, and he's well known, we'll, then represent him. So make him well known. Well, how do you make him well known? You have to get some sort of show. And to do a show, you do a proposal that I have several of them over here that have gone out that are maybe 10, 15 pages. his quotes, his vita, his photographs, his maybe slides, way back with slides, all, a production piece that shows.
Pat, I want to follow up on you mentioned the museums are saying get him well known.
The galleries are saying.
What does that mean? well known. Where does well known start? Does it have to be well known by the general public, by dealers, by who?
I mean, I understand that for most people, it's continually showing and showing and showing throughout your life, probably, to become known. And Sam decided not to do that. So it makes it much more difficult because I'm starting from the 1950s. So his work from the 1950s is the work that is perhaps most saleable, most popular. I mean, I do have a gallery and a dealer, and they did a beautiful catalog, and they did a show, and they sold a few paintings. They sold maybe 10, 12 paintings or whatever. Haven't sold that much recently. They found me. I mean, to a large degree, what has happened to me is luck, is somehow fate of things coming.
Was there an event before they found you that resulted?
Yeah, I was out trying to wait for my car to be legal, and I bumped into a man down the street who was waiting for his car to be legal to park it on 90th Street. And he was a dealer, and we were chatting. And I offered to show him some of Sam's paintings, and he came in, and he didn't deal with that type of art, but he knew these other people, and he brought them, and they wanted to take him. And this was back in I guess probably 2008, 2009. I don't think.
And where were you? You were in New York?
In New York, Upper West Side, 90th Street.
It's interesting. We've been exploring this topic of how much location matters. And just in this instance, you happen to bump into someone.
Right.
And a lot of what we're hearing is that it's location because of proximity to the people that can open the doors.
I think that probably is true. Yeah. I mean, that his students have opened certain doors. I mean, in a sense, this woman from Princeton, his location here on the Cape, his friend, Harry Hall, who owned this Scargo pottery and had that one show for him, was a founder of the museum that's here. Founded it 40 years ago. And now it's a beautiful small museum, but has a very nice permanent collection. And so he was offered a retrospective there. And I was working on a catalog for that. At one point, Irving Sandler even said he might write for it, but then wasn't able to. I mean, Sam had made enough contacts in the 50s, and that was Provincetown, which is a great location, so I'm sure the connections he made there, and New York. Philadelphia is not a place that was very fortunate for many people. Good place to leave, to go away from, I guess. Sam tried to reinvigorate the whole of Philadelphia with this group 55, from 55 to 58. And it did for quite a while. I'm sure it helped many people. But, he eventually stopped that. It was all a great deal of energy on his part to educate the public forums to help people understand what abstract art was and the whole modern language and the whole visual language, for that matter. Most people are not visually literate, not understanding of how the visual language works. I mean, advertisers tend to do so. They know how to use shapes, forms, and colors and atmospheres to sell things. But within the world of art, the visual language.
Is that one of the reasons for the film, is to get him more well-known and to provide?
Yes, it is. Yes, absolutely it is. It will survive in a way a show won't. A show comes and goes. I had, say, 8 shows. Okay, people enjoy them, etc. Maybe you make contacts. But then the show is gone. And catalogs, I've done about 5 catalogs, I guess. Worked on 5 catalogs. They're around, but not a lot of people read necessarily. And the colors, even my own book, I think it has helped an enormous amount. That book has definitely opened doors. And that was supposed to be a catalog. And then I met a publisher. That was happenstance also. And the curator I'm working with now, I totally just bumped into her. Except I made myself available. I went to a Catalog Resonate Scholars Association meeting.
This is Barbara Willanen?
This was Barbara Willanen. And she was there. And I'd gone out to lunch with the curator, the Hoffman curator at the time, or a person working on the Catalog Resonate was Tina Dickey. And she invited me to go to this Catalog Resonate, and we all went out for lunch, and I met Barbara Willanen, who knew Sam because he had written about Arthur B. Carl's in his review. But now she has been curator for 2 shows. We've written a lot about Sam, and we'll be giving a lecture during this one also at PAM, and supports his work. But she came and stayed at my home. She spent time surrounded by his paintings and came to really love them, see them in a way that takes time. You have to take time to look at art that's as dense and rich as his is. It's not a one-off. And there's a lot of art now that's, makes for a nice background. It doesn't demand too much.
Mm-hmm.
But people are stressed, and that may be what they need now.
Maybe. Mm-hmm. What's been, in everything that you've done so far, where have you seen the largest glimpse of this is the right path? If I keep doing this will get him remembered, or this, because I know that you were telling us before how many works he has, how expensive it is to store them, maintain them, preserve them. So what have you seen so far as what looks like the best path to helping at least fund some of that in the future?
I guess I might hope that this coming show in Provincetown would be one of the best opportunities, and perhaps the film. But I won't know until that evolves. I must say, I can't look at any one thing and say, oh, well, this led to that. The shows have not led to sales of his work. The dealer led to. I think if you can find a good dealer. Now there's nibbles from dealers right now. But his work is not in style. The market is driving the world of art right now. The art is not driving it. The quality of art is not driving anything out there. If he was a woman, it would be better. If he was a different color, it would be better. If he was from a different nation, he was born in Ukraine. But his art is challenging. It's rich. You can live with it, and I do, and continue to grow from it for years. But people, I think it was de Kooning referred to the slipping glimpse. And I think that's what most people give art, or it's intellectual now. It's, you read the labels and you spend more time with the label than you do with the art. And I can't say that I'm not that optimistic about it. But I do have and was given by Sam the kind of long view. Either it survives or it doesn't. Either it gets out there more. It's really, I do what I can do, and then it's just, and I can't say one path. I can't really.
You mentioned that after one of the film showings, someone came up to you and said, now I understand abstract art. Do you think that that's a barrier? And that maybe that's in today's market, maybe that's a threshold that needs to be crossed first.
Yeah, abstract. Well, most art now has a political or social message. It's topical. It's dealing, it's trying to inform, to change, to influence with regards to society and politics and culture, etc. And that's just a different, some of it is wonderful. And it's not like I dismiss all of it. But as far as getting the work out through in a massive amount of way, abstract art is more challenging. It's interesting, you keep learning how the brain works, that there's recent studies about the fact that when we see things, we actually are not seeing them. Our minds project what we're going to see or expect to see and fill in the rest. And that doesn't work with abstract art. You have to really be there with it and absorb it. And absorb it not just with your eyes and a quick glance either, because your whole body is the thing that responds empathetically to gesture and forms and colors and texture, the whole thing. I mean, modern dancers know this. You're working with the whole thing to convey ideas, and it takes time with a painting that just sits on a wall. And even with a show, there's so many of them. I mean, in a sense, a show is asking a painting after painting to compete with each other, or, to take the time to really look at them. But the shows be up for 3 months, and that's good. And people come back and see it more than once. I've had too. So through the shows, the film talks a lot about his philosophy, because I think that is something that was at the core of, as I said, he was a life giver and an educator throughout his life. And that was what was perhaps most important to him, be it educating himself as he painted and trying to go into a deeper part of himself to come forth with more that he could transfer. And he didn't say it was from himself. It wasn't ego. It was from something beyond him. It would go through him in a clearer, cleaner way. And to do that for his teaching, that was the important thing. So the film goes into that a lot. And I don't know where its niche will be or if it will work, but it's valid. It has worth. And I think it's being true to him.
It's really interesting. There's right now, take today, social media, how people follow or connect with people. They'll connect, it seems to me, people will connect around something that someone stands for, their way of life, their views, and then everything else is a byproduct of that they may like, follow, purchase, whatever, because of the ideals that they find in this person that they agree with. And I think you're onto something here with that. If the film does that and it sheds light on, this is what he taught, this is what he believed, this is what he opened others' eyes to. And there's a quote that you had mentioned, which I thought was amazing during our discovery call. And it was, you had referenced it a little bit here, but it was interesting that it was that you talked about the plasticity and nature flowing through someone, and that the brain is essentially a bottleneck, which I thought was so powerful. And I think there's a lot of people that could resonate with that in the freedom of expression, and, that maybe if they understand it and are able to absorb it, whether it's through the film, maybe it's through short clips on social media, I don't know. But once they absorb it, maybe they'll look at the art with different eyes and have a different experience, maybe closer to the experience that you're having with the art, that Barbara had to the art. So it would be really interesting to see how that evolves.
And I would like, and my goal too is to have them have their own experience with art. That Sam said that everybody should paint. That basically everybody should create. In other words, that this is psychic breathing. And the word psyche, by the way, which we think of now, psychology and psychiatrists and all this, I think it originally came Freud and German translation. It was originally the soul. The psyche is the soul. It's psychic breathing. It's the breathing of individual souls and that's who we are as people. And if we can be healthy in that way as people, we can function socially in every other way in a much healthier way too. So if the film can nurture people's interest and willingness to be open to exploring what they can paint themselves. And, right now we're being trained to paint. We're being trained of art as craft. I mean, one of the things that I found most appalling is that here I love public television and there's fabulous films on it and fabulous things on public television. But one of their major supporters, and I guess this is because that's where the world is today, is they tout Bob Ross. Okay, this is how you make a tree. This is how you make the sky. This is taking a craft, a technical thing, and applying it to manufacture a picture that goes on a wall. Sam always said, you can manufacture a painting. But that's not what art is. You don't manufacture it by absorbing everybody else's technique, or you discover your own technique. You discover your own way of making meaningful something that gets out there that you can see, that has a life of its own, be it a piece of music, fabulous jazz music. It doesn't happen that often. It's not that easy to do it. I remember one jazz composer saying, if I can come up with 3 really good works in my lifetime, I will be so happy. And I think that's a kind of standard that Sam had, too, about his paintings. But, each of them, each work has something that can give. And everybody does it when they're young. All children create. All children want to get, do this. And then we get funneled for society's sake, and we need to be in many ways, but then we get blocked. The book that Sam has written, it said we are all child abusers. It starts that way because we're all saying, oh, we can't do it. The artists are the ones who do it. The artists are the ones that know how to do it. I don't know how to do it. I can't draw, so I can't paint. I can't draw straight lines, so I can't create. I mean, we are holding ourselves back from our own natural abilities. And the people in all different fields that, the Einsteins of the world, whoever, are the people who, just broke past that, broke past what, the beginner's mind, having a wide open beginner's mind and exploring and being able to do that and be resilient to it and know that that didn't work. I'll try this, or fail better, as Sam said once to his students. Fail better. The failures are, you're learning. You're open to learning. And that's what creating is as you're doing this. Creo creare, the Latin root. He knew Latin, he knew Greek, he knew all kinds of languages. He had a fabulous education, and he would bring it to the classes. Creo creare, to grow. It's the Latin word to grow. And if human beings keep growing, then they're healthier than if they lock in. But people also, he said, people have 2 natural urges, one to hold on and one to reach out. And given the choice, usually to hold on. So it's easier to make a Bob Ross painting, hold on. And you have these people, paint nights with people reproducing little paintings almost. And it can be fun to do. You're using a brush or pushing paint around. It's a little bit different than your neighbors. It's fun. It's okay. But But to really get involved more deeply is also really important, I think. And seeing how Sam went about it and how he got his students to go about it. We do have 3 sections about how his basic teaching, but the principles I've talked about are the principles he lived by, the plasticity, the aiming to make an independent presence out of the painting, something that it didn't matter who made it. Some of the most beautiful works I've seen when I traveled with Sam were anonymous. And it didn't matter. It's that the work had soul. And it lasted and was treasured by people. So that person didn't become famous, obviously. But the work survived. That's what needs to, the work needs to be strong enough, good enough, universal. Yes.
That's an interesting point.
Somehow it'll survive.
Right. It's not necessarily the artist if the work can survive. Then
yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's preserved.
It's interesting that the late portraits of Rembrandt fill a room in our National Gallery. He wasn't even American. But they are universal. And there's enough people who see that and sense that and know that. And trying to create that kind of work is what Sam was involved in. And now it's just, I'd like to see enough people. I was told you have to have enough people who know of who like his work, who know of his work, that it can survive. And so just trying to get it out to share it through these shows and through the books. But knowing all the way along, I have no real control over it at all. And he knew that. He never would have asked me to do what I've done.
Very.
And I have my own work. I'm a painter. And I'm, speaking of unknown, I've hardly ever shown. I show occasionally a few little things here and there. And I have a lot of paintings. And it's still, I still feed from them and learn from them and grow from them and weed them and, let a lot go. And who knows where they're not going to go anywhere in particular. But they've brought value to my life in a way I'm learning to see. I'm able to then treasure other works that I think might last, such as Sam's.
Do you plan on getting involved with any of the dealers? Because it seems like you're saying that may be the path to having it remembered or be able to sell so you can buy the rest of it.
Sometimes a dealer will buy out a whole artist's work, and then I don't know what they'll all do with it. I mean, I've had many people say, "Well, what happens after I'm gone?" And I don't know. I mean, his family knows it's his wonderful artist, but then so was Sam's wife, Anita, was a very good painter. And they all have lives of their own. They all have full lives, I've been fortunate. I was able to retire from teaching early and able to really devote a lot of time to this. And then what was my, you asked a question about what was worked. And so what led me on? Mostly, it seemed serendipity. Mm-hmm. The show right now, coming up, somebody meets somebody at a yoga retreat in Mexico, and it leads to something. Now, what are the odds? A curator meets a museum director at an odd yoga retreat in Mexico. And this contributes to something here that's going to happen. We're, bumping into Barbara Wellannon at the Catalog Raisonné, or the man on the street who brought me the dealers. I don't know if I'd I've reached out to some dealers, and I've had some dealers come and see his work, say, "Oh my gosh, come to storage," and tell me. And they some wonderful dealers with a great gallery. His work is fantastic. You've got a treasure trove, but they didn't take him on. Right now, they're focusing. They have to pay the rent. They have to be, business people first. And his work is not in a slot that is going to be marketed that much now. It may come around again. There's cycles. Mm-hmm. Who knows?
And I think that, what you're describing here is kind of a continuation of the stuff that we as creatures really don't understand about how the world works. It seemed like Sam was fine-tuned into it with the nature of energy and spirits interacting with each other. It's just, again, Alex and I are outsiders from the art world, and we're trying to make sense of this the same way we try to make sense in business, where it's you do this and something happens. Mm-hmm. But it seems like so much of this is that energy, spiritual side of things, dots are connecting. And, I don't know if there's a question in that or if I'm completely off base, but I mean, it's like, it just seems serendipitous, for lack of a better word, that these occurrences are happening.
Yeah, it really is. And it's so interesting. There are times when, like, maybe I've put out a great deal and all of a sudden some little thing that will happen that will make me think, yeah, I'm doing the right thing.
There you go.
Reinforce it. And it is, and it's not like I'm looking for it or expecting it. And it's not like I'm, with a Ouija board or what, I'm not, it's not.
Right.
It's just, it's when you look back, whoa, or whatever. A song comes along that suddenly confirms something that was just so relevant. So, these things sometimes happen, and you just have to, the mystery. There's the mystery and there's the manifestations. And mostly we're dealing with all the manifestations, and we don't know much about them anyway and fumble along, et cetera. And Sam did have a much longer view and wider view, I think, of the whole thing and of all life and a sense of that. And he conveyed that. So it was a spiritual exchange, I think, that we all had with him.
Absolutely.
Which, and so famous, it comes and goes, and it deals mostly with manifestations, I believe. And it's, I guess it can be produced, but he wasn't interested. I'm not particularly interested, except I guess a certain amount of fame is necessary to get into museums. Literally, I'm a collections committee at the museum. I'm chairman of one of the collections committee, and you can't, if it's a wonderful work of art and you have a mission statement of what you're trying to do, and to some degree for us, it's a locale of where we live. If it's a fine enough work of art, if somebody's not known, it still may get in the collection. But if they're well known, and that's by connecting with institutions, teaching in institutions, it makes a big difference. And Sam, when he left that kind of connection. And then the galleries. So there's institutions that promote fame because they promote themselves as well in the process.
Got it. Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, what I'm getting out of this, and we're trying to squeeze your lifetime of work into a 45-minute podcast episode here. But, the thing that keeps coming out of this is, and maybe it's the lesson, and maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but I think the lesson here is that to use baseball terms, you keep stepping up to the plate. You keep going for it. You keep going for it. And I don't think those manifestations have a shot at happening unless you keep
that's
going for it.
True. That is absolutely true. Is you just keep stepping up to it. That's right. And I have thought of those exact words myself on many occasions. And at times when I weary, and there are those times, etc., you have to do is look at his painting. And you just say, okay, and it gives you another kick. You just step up again. You step up again, go for it again. You got it. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great place to cap things off for today. And, we can't say enough how appreciative we are that you took the time, especially with everything you have going on, to take the time and chat with us about this topic. And you've been so generous with your time. So we can't thank you enough.
Well, I'll certainly send you links so that you can look at the films once they're out, once we have here. And I hope you enjoy that. And then the Vimeo, once we have the Vimeo, the Hoffman film as well. And I think you'll see how the Hoffman film, that I'm really carrying on. I try to carry on all he, because I have such respect for what he did, what he always.
Terrific. And last thing, Pat, if someone's listening to this episode and they want to reach out to you, whether to talk to you or to inquire about Sam's work, what's the best way to reach you?
Well, all my contact information and everything about Sam is on our website, which is just www.samfeinstein.com. And there's a 12-minute section of that Scargo film that's on there that you can look at now. And then other films, we will have links to them in the future. But a lot of history is right on there.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Best wishes to you. And I look forward to listening to this whole podcast and maybe getting some insights into other things I haven't done that I should be doing. I always feel like I'm floundering along. Somebody says to me, "Oh, you know what you're doing." No, I was given this gift, this privilege in a way, because it's working with beautiful things and it asks a lot of me. And that is a good, healthy thing too. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Famous or Forgotten podcast. We hope you found it insightful, educational, entertaining, and everything else that goes into a great podcast. We are always looking for folks to provide insights into this conversation around artists and what makes them succeed or not. If you feel like you have some insights to provide to this show, feel free to check the podcast notes below, or if you're watching on YouTube, in the show description. Our contact information is there. You can get in touch, and we'd love to start the conversation with you and allow you to provide any kind of insights that you think might be helpful. Stay tuned, and we'll see you on the next episode.